welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our viewers and our listeners out there. It's Tuesday. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company, managing partner of Saywitz Properties, and we are going to talk some real estate again today. Welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. I'm excited about today's show. I want to welcome our guest, Brian Ulf, who is the CEO of an organization called Share in Los Angeles. And we are going to talk some real estate. We are going to talk some housing. We are going to talk some homeless solutions and whatever else we can make up along the way. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Barry, for having me. I love the topic. No BS.
Yeah. So we're going to dive in. We're going to get to it. We're not going to sugarcoat it. And if we don't know the answer, one of us is going to make it up. How's that? So
I could go with that.
All right. So I appreciate you coming on the show, and you are a longtime real estate broker, investor extraordinaire, and have a long history in the real estate markets here in Southern California. I want to go back maybe and just sort of rewind, and we'll talk about how you got to where you sit today. But you began at USC and went to college there, got out. I guess I want to understand what made you get into the real estate environment in the first place. Was there an epiphany, or was it by happenstance? How did it go?
Actually, it was by watching other people in real estate making a lot more money than I was as the Budweiser sales rep for LA City. You might remember back in your days of Grubb & Ellis, there was a guy, Scott Burnham, who's obviously killed it down in Orange County. But I would see that Scott was making $140,000 a year his second year out of college, and I was making $35,000. I go, God, he's a sales guy. I'm a sales guy. Let me get into this business.
Yeah, you probably got more free beer than he did at the time, but
but
overall,
he's got a lot more. Because I had free beer. I'm going to be 22 years sober on Thursday, and he's counting coupons.
Yeah,
he's been extremely successful. Really proud of him. He's a great guy.
And I'm sure as the Budweiser rep, you had lots of friends, some of which you may not have even wanted, but in the real estate environment, so you get into, so this is the 80s, right? And it's early 80s, mid 80s, the markets are starting to take off. Interest rates at one point are extremely high. And then we have just the real estate boom, the economic boom in the 80s, and things take off, and it's very hard not to make money and get caught up in what's going on in the real estate markets everywhere. And you were dealing in the brokerage environment and the investment environment, and like myself, you've seen a lot of crashes and a lot of booms, right? So late 80s, which is about the time I got into real estate, market takes a tank, a bad tank, overbuilt, and interest rates had come down by that point, but the economy really in a slump and the real estate market really in the tank. And so, but you stick with it. Right? I mean,
absolutely.
You got to do it, right? And there is opportunity certainly in a down market, especially for people who are creative, and whether that's on the buyer side or the tenant side of things. And then we come back and the real estate market comes back, and then we have the .com, and then we have the .bomb, and then we have the recession, and then I'm going to fast forward into COVID. Right. And so pre-COVID, the market is on what I'm going to call the upswing. Everything's good. Nobody's complaining. Everybody's making money. Everybody's got equity in their house, and interest rates are 2 or 3 or 4%, depending upon what you're doing. And then COVID comes and it creates a whole host of issues for a lot of people, not only on the housing side, because people are working from home, and those people that aren't working are struggling to stay in their homes. And it puts a completely different spin on the whole environment. And so for you now in today's world are involved with this organization, Share. I want to touch on that a little bit, and I guess, number one, tell me what it stands for, and then what's the purpose?
Share stands for Self-Help and Recovery Exchange. It's a 30-year-old nonprofit that was founded by a wonderful woman named Ruth Holman. And the concept of Share is we take peer-run employees. We all have peer-run employees, which means people with lived experience. You said a lot of things for me to unpack from the 80s, 90s, and up to today. Because it's the 80s, 90s, and up to today what got me into the Share portfolio of what I'm doing today. On Thursday, I'll be 22 years sober if I make it to Thursday, but let's hope I'm...
Congratulations for that.
Thank you very much. And I had a grand mal seizure in front of 80 guys at Cushman and Wakefield from an alcohol withdrawal. And so I was never allowed to be anonymous as it relates to my problem. Everybody knew that I had had a problem with alcohol. But the longer I stayed sober, the more people would call me and say, hey, can you help my dad? Can you help my mom? Can you help my sister? I was helping fellow colleagues throughout the real estate industries, their wives, their husbands, all the above. And it started to fill me in a position of what I was doing, that I was really making a difference. And, I loved the real estate world. I partied hard in the real estate world back in the 80s and 90s. I think it's the experience that I got, through all those good times and bad times. I mean, I think I did over 6 million square feet of tenant rep. That was really my specialty. And I learned about it in the 80s, the recession in the 90s. If you were doing, as the adage says, 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work. And I was one of those 20% in LA. So I did get hired to help people during those times and corporate tenants.
And for those folks who weren't around, I mean, in the 80s, which I loved it, right? They had parties. They were giving away Rolex watches and a lease on a Porsche and shrimp and lobster. I mean,
I was at all those events.
Oh, free food, free booze, free entertainment, Laker girls, you name it, right? And then one day, somebody turned the spigot off pretty quick.
Yeah, but they still entertained the guys that had the tenants. But you're right. And, back then, I played golf 11 days a month, but never on weekends. So if you look at that, taking people out to LA Country Club or all the others, I mean, that's just how business was done back then. And it's completely different now. But I think the big thing that you came to the conclusion is what's happened in COVID and the effects of how that's dealing with the real estate market. And I think that's been the biggest disconnect. I mean, we had high interest rates and we had depressed markets and we had tenants. In downtown LA, for the majority of the life of my career in downtown LA, people didn't go into brand new buildings. They changed addresses based on terms and conditions that were happening. But the COVID thing, I think you might know through looking at my bio that I'm on the parent board of the YMCA that oversees all 28 YMCAs in LA. And during COVID, we had to furlough about 2,600 people. And when we started bringing them back, we realized that we had a much bigger job as the effects of COVID, bringing back these people in the sense that 47% were gaining weight, 37% were drinking too much, there was spousal abuse, there was child abuse. The statistics were down 700%. 700% of the statistics for child abuse, there was less. And that was because kids weren't in school, is where they get reported. So you had this huge problem, not to mention COVID, not to mention in the lower economy households where grandparents and everybody lives together in a smaller house. They did witness COVID, they did witness death, and the overall mental condition of the people that were taken out of their jobs, financial insecurity, created this big problem. And at the Y, we are onboarding and have brought back these people. I'm the task force chair of the Emotional Social Wellbeing Task Force there, where we're putting people into getting counseling, to getting self-help support groups. And that all came from what SHARE is. SHARE is the Self-Help and Recovery Exchange. We do self-help support groups, where you might just consider it like AA, going to an AA class, building community, fellowship, and kinship. There's over 700 different traumas that people experience that are out there. And anything that creates an upset within your body is some sort of a trauma or an upset. And there's a self-help support group for each and every one of those groups. SHARE created a model of putting people into housing in the sense that if we put people into housing versus single rooms, they would get better because they formed community and kinship. I understand that because I lived in a hotel by myself for 18 months when my addiction, lost my families. I'm on the pillow, worried out, fear, anxiety, upset in my brain. I'm lonely, I'm isolated. And it wasn't until I got out of that hotel room and went to an AA meeting at the YMCA that I started to see other people that were like me that were getting better. And that's the whole concept of the SHARE model.
And so it's a peer housing with support.
100% peer.
Right?
If I'm on the street, I still do this myself. I get down on the street and I do outreach. I've done it on Skid Row. I've done it on Venice Boardwalk and other places. I have an ability to talk to somebody that's in that situation because I can give them my story. I can reveal to them that I've been through a lot of the things they've been through. I don't dress like this when I'm doing it, but the fact of the matter is I do have lived experience. I do know what it's like to live in a single room. I do know what it's like to be on Skid Row. Part of my territory with Budweiser was all the bars and liquor stores down on Skid Row. You get a big life lesson when you spend time down there. And, having that experience and then recovering, you're a big asset. Most of the outreach people in the city systems or the county, they hire people to do outreach that don't have lived experience, that also don't have an ability to house anybody because the housing isn't built. We're a housing now company.
Right. I mean, it's real time because you can help somebody get off the street immediately. I mean, we've
today.
Yeah. I mean, we've had other mayors from other cities on the show in the past, and they talk about how the governor, in his efforts to try and deal with the homeless issue throughout the state, that they mandate, each city has a mandate to create low-income housing or to try and convert a motel into a transitional housing and do these other things. And I feel like when we spoke with them, not only is there pushback from the cities, but the expectations and the requirements are just not realistic and not in real time. Your opportunity to take somebody off the street puts them immediately into a different living situation instead of waiting for somebody to go renovate a property.
That's absolutely. I housed 580 people last year at an average of $20,000 per person. The city and the county are housing a person for a cost of about $858,000. So if you can compare that, we're $838,000 cheaper than they are, and yet it's hard for us to get funded because there's a lot of people that don't want us to be successful in that arena. I mean, I take that back. I mean, I can't say that everything that they're trying to do with all the agencies is as good intentions. But when you run a system that's not being built to solve homelessness, it's being built to service homelessness.
Yeah, and we've had others on the show talk about it's not just an issue of giving somebody a roof over their head. While that is certainly a big portion of it, you have to be able to provide an environment and services that are going to help deal with the other issues that these folks are dealing with. And if you don't do that, they wind up right back on the street or creating harm for themselves or others, and you haven't really solved the problem.
Again, the biggest problem on the street, Barry, is the lack of social support. Everybody that's on the street has to live day to day. People say you can't criminalize the homelessness, but you have to criminalize the people that are preying on the homeless. I mean, the addiction that takes place, and what nobody also talks about is that every homeless encampment is run by a gang. I mean, a street gang that feeds up to the cartel. No one wants to talk about that from the politics side, but the people that are in an encampment in Venice are either paying rent to the Shoreline Crips, the Culver City Boys, or V13, Venice 13.
To
they control the street.
To keep them safe.
No, they do it because they become the sales team. You get a guy that's addicted to a meth habit, and he's given five bags of meth, or 15 bags of meth, of which he has to sell those. And for that, he gets to keep 3 or 4 for himself to stay. Yeah. They run the sex trade, they run the prostitution, they run all those different functions, all the bicycles that are stolen and being repurposed. I mean, it's a whole operation and a business. But the instance, you were talking about the mayor and things, when they come to an encampment and they do a video or photo op and say, hey, I'm standing in front of 20 people in this encampment. And the next day there's a press release saying, I moved these 20 people into housing, the hotels with wraparound services. And it's true, she actually did. But the problem is that program doesn't necessarily work because the wraparound services that are provided in these housing solutions is you don't have to use the services. You can go into that hotel room, you can drink, you don't have to take bipolar medicine, you don't have to go to AA, you don't have to have a job, you get 3 meals a day. And the other thing no one's talking about is the cost per person. Right. And it costs per month to put somebody in a hotel.
And who's paying for that at the end of the day? Isn't it you and I? Right. I mean, it's taxpayer money that I get it. The do-good is I got these people off the street. But you didn't finish the sentence or the job, did you?
Well, it's the politics that are involved in this. I mean, the electeds are supposed to get reelected, and the pushback in the California political system, the far left says, hey, you can't make somebody do this. Hey, he has a right to live on the street. He has a right to do this. Well, again, it's back to the criminalization. You're right. Everybody has a right to be. But the criminal activity and everything has happened, and then you have a perfect storm with LAPD not being able to do anything.
Right. And then you also have
you
the issue of the fact that when you have these encampments and you have people hanging out, it jeopardizes the safety, the security, and the appearance of the rest of the neighborhood, right? So everybody suffers from it.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare what these people all witness in their neighborhoods. I mean, I lived in Venice for the last 18 years. You can't believe me walking through the streets, walking their kids to school, and it's almost impossible. You can't ride your bikes after school, play in neighborhoods whatsoever. The criminalization of what's happening. I mean, Barry, I can walk up to you and rob you of $950, and it's a misdemeanor.
Yeah, okay? and nothing will happen. Right, the repercussion.
You'll be at it.
Yeah, there's nothing that will happen. I mean, and
then if you don't show up to your court date, guess what the penalty is?
Nothing.
It's a misdemeanor.
Yeah,
it's a misdemeanor. So there's no accountability and no incentive for anybody to change. And it's the same thing with selling drugs or anything else. You know, I can come into your house, and if I don't hurt you, I get a trespassing ticket. If you don't provide services, bathrooms and things on the street, think if you have 100 people in an encampment in Venice around the library, and the existing politician didn't want to put up bathrooms because the people said, if you put bathrooms, it'll become permanent. But if you don't put up bathrooms, where are the people going to go? Where are the people going to go? No, they go across the street and into the yards of the residents.
Yeah.
By the way, when they finish their business and there's a window that's open or a door or a garage, now you're going to have the criminal behavior.
Right. And now you're speaking my world, where as a landlord of an apartment building or an office building, you have people that are coming looking to break in, looking for a bathroom, looking for a place to hang out for the night, looking for a place to shoot up or whatever they're doing. And now you've compromised the rest of that property, which is all legitimate people.
Yeah, and that's been another one of the big demises of what's happened in downtown. I mean, you talk about when our market's going to recover. You have two huge problems in downtown as far as office space. Number one, tenants haven't been instructed, or corporations and businesses haven't told their people that they have to come back to work, or some sort of a hybrid situation. The other is they don't want, because of safety issues, to have to bring their people down because the streets are a nightmare to deal with. And traffic patterns have switched a lot. So it's just, Century City's on fire. Century City's on fire. I mean, you can't even find space in Century City, but downtown, obviously, the vacancy rates and those things. I really think until the COVID and the hybrid situation and all that comes to light, tenants are just going to wait and see what they do, because it costs so much money. The landlords don't have the TIs right now to build it out. So tenants are going to have to build out themselves.
And everything costs 3 times as much anyway. And so it's very hard to get anything built.
But I strongly believe in my heart, because I've been through a lot of these different things like you have. I think it's going to come back. I think there is. The expansion of LA is really where it makes sense from a geographic location, where all the freeways come together, the train station, and all that. Oh, by the way, in downtown LA, the housing market is still hot, So
yeah, the issue is, though, if you're just cleaning up 20 people and relocating them temporarily, or you're moving them off of one corner into another, you haven't really, at the end of the day, addressed or done anything towards solving the problem. And so I think while the intent is there, it's a bit smoke and mirrors. I agree with you. I agree it's politics. I mean, you have the mayor in Los Angeles who said, hey, I'm going to implement some additional restrictions on landlords for apartments so that you can't evict tenants, which are people that are not paying, that are taking advantage of the system and precluding somebody else who would pay, who's a good participant in the system, from having a roof over their head, and inhibiting the landlord from being able to either pay for their own bills or make a living, only because you don't want the homeless count to go up, because it'll look bad for you. Right?
Yeah,
so you put these restrictions out there, and then what happens is, at the end of the day, eventually they're evicted, right? And then where do they go? Then they've got to come to you or others, and so nobody's really addressed the issue, which is, I got to come up with a solution, not delay the inevitable. I mean, that's my take on it.
It's hard to be an investor to come in and buy apartments, or anything for the long run, when you have a mansion tax that's incredible. You have all the fees and conditions and blocks, red tape and bureaucracy to get anything done. And then you have tenants that the city backs, that they don't have to pay the rent, which is, that's just what it is. And until a little bit of all of that changes, until the housing costs come way down to relocate. I mean, do you really believe the word, hey, I just built 100 units for the homeless, and it's affordable housing I just built? Well, what's affordable about an $800,000 400 square foot room and call it $1 million with the land? I mean, if you and I went out and bought a 400 square foot room for $1 million, our mortgage would be $7,000 a month. What's affordable about that? None of these people can pay the rent. So it's really government subsidized housing.
Of course. And then the issue is, look, it's not the city that's building it. If it was the government or the state that was giving, or the county that was giving the money to the city and then said to the city, you go build it, hire a builder and build it, you'll own it. That's one thing. They go back and they say, hey, we want you to go to the free market. We want you to find a developer who will do this. But you got all these restrictions on it, and you still have to deal with actually turning a profit and getting the thing built. Those are some tall tasks.
Well, it's a tall task, but it's just, again, how do you get an approval? It's a pay-to-play game for all contractors and service providers in that sense, meaning, you have to get on the bid list in order to be able to build one of those buildings. And the truth of it is, you and I both know it doesn't cost $800,000 to build a 400 square foot room.
Right. I mean,
so how they get those prices up is the issue. And if it's $800,000 to build a unit, it's 100 units, it's $80 million. And when you have 4 contractor people come in and say, hey, it's 80 million, 80 million, 500, 79 million. Right. All 4 numbers are within 500,000. The general public looks and says, God, that must be what it costs.
Right. And that's
so
not reality.
It's smoke and mirrors on that. We can't buy our way out of this, It's just, these units should be, they program the $1.6 billion, $1.2 billion initiative that happened back in 2016 was $1.2 billion to house 10,000 homes. That was doing a price range of about $135,000 a unit. And now you're to make, we can't sustain that.
No.
And we spent spent $6 billion over the last few years, and homelessness has gone up. So you can't get these units built. The 10,000 units.
Right. That's my point. If you built 100 units, if you built 100 units, how many people would apply for those? Thousands, tens of thousands, right? There would be a 10-year wait list from day one.
Yeah, but there's lists and the coordinated entry system and how you get it in, and not to mention they get to interview the people that go into these buildings, and so they can nix or whatever. It's not first come first serve or the list. It's a different way to do it, and the other problem is when there's no rules in the building. You look at Skid Row Housing Trust, the one in receivership for the 29 buildings they have. You wouldn't even believe the damage. They had to close because the insides of these buildings got completely ruined and gutted. Doors broken, hinges, everything, no security. It was just unbelievable, the damage. And they don't have that $15 million in their budget to repurpose that 100-person building. I mean, because there's no rules.
Right. So I'm going to ask you this. I don't know that there's an answer, but I mean, is there a solution short term? Or do you just do the best with what you can and you try and help as many people as you can with the resources you have?
Well, that's where you come back to me being in share. Look, the system right now is an aircraft carrier, and I can't turn that aircraft carrier around. You're going to see a lot of things happen with this Judge Carter, who came from Orange County when he cleaned up the sewer system down there with homeless people. But there's the LA Alliance did a lawsuit, and Judge Carter is hearing it. And they are basically telling the city and the county that they're going to go through an entire audit on every penny that they spent in the last 2 or 3 years. And that's going to be a very eye-opening experience. Organizations like mine, if I do outreach, I have a 30% success rate. So, for every 100 people, I can get 300 of them off the street. And why would you not want to fund a program like mine? 100,000, I can take 30,000. I can't fix the whole program, but I have an ability to do something. But the funding streams don't support my project because HUD only forms new construction, not renting houses.
Right.
Our program encourages recovery. The other programs don't. There's no faith-based people that can get involved. Union Rescue Mission doesn't get funded because of church and state. Father Boyle with Homeboy doesn't get funded because he has requires abstinence and is faith-based. So there are so many things. Why would you not have faith-based organizations being able to get funded if it gets people better? I mean, there's 29 million people in recovery. Whatever tools it takes for that individual to turn their life around, why would we not be funding that tool?
Right. And
So,
to me, it's a
yeah.
question of whatever money you do have, spreading it around to touch as many people as possible. And the byproduct of that is you will have successes, and some will be better than others. But I couldn't agree with you more. I guess the question is, okay, so here we are. We're coming into an election. And homeless is, while it's not the top, there are many other bigger picture issues like the border and the economy and other things. But homeless, everybody who comes on the show, homeless is an issue, right? For every city, it's an issue. If you have a home and you see homeless people in your neighborhood, it's an issue if you're struggling to keep a roof over your head, and it's an issue certainly if you are homeless. And so, do you see the election that's coming up changing anything, or is it just going to be more of the same?
Well, I think, in the election and the control of whether it's the Republican Party or however you want to call it, whatever that party's called nowadays, I think they want to give back public space to the people. They want to stick up for the person that not only is homeless and get them better, but stick up for the people that are having to live based on the consequences of the existing program. And so if you can clean the streets and also build temporary shelter. The reason shelters don't work, Barry, is because they're unsafe. They're unsafe because guess what? Remember I told you about the gangs and the people that are sales rep? Every person that you take off the street from those encampments is already a salesperson. And you put them into the encampments. You put them into the
shared living
shelters, or the 2-person tents or the hotels. Those buildings and shelters are now covered with salespeople that are selling drugs, and there's no rules whatsoever about being able to use them.
And that's not getting that person healthy or well. It's also
that
not
happens at LA County Jail.
Right. It's also not getting the person back implemented into society with a real job.
But everybody goes like this and says, no, that doesn't happen.
Right. No. So where do you? I'm going to back up for a second because we could go back and forth about this all day, and we don't have it. But in terms of the economy in general, in terms of interest rates, while neither you nor I have a crystal ball, do any of those things affect the real estate market in general? And then do you see that changing housing as a whole? Not so much for homeless folks, but just in general, I'm asking big picture. You still have higher interest rates. Everybody keeps talking, they're going to come down, they're going to come down. I say no, not anytime soon.
Yeah, well, again, I go back to the history and said, you and I somehow paid a mortgage at 12 and 13% interest rates. I think the mentality of, and it's very tough for, like, when I was 26 and built a house and had $1 million mortgage, I was doing well and all that. The kids today, Barry, there's no kids that I know that can go in and buy the home that they were raised in any of these neighborhoods that they grew up in. And so the pressure for that population to do that, it's very depressing. I live in Marina Del Rey where the rents are similar to what it would be if you bought a permanent supportive house. It's $5,000 or $6,000 to rent a 2-bedroom condo in LA. The median price is $2,700 a unit for rent in South Central Los Angeles and throughout the neighborhoods that are. Those homes when I first started in this were $200,000 or $300,000 are now $700,000 or $800,000 to buy a home, near Manchester and Alameda. It's just.
Well, and look, if you look at it and say, how much money do I need to make to be able to pay that rent and then to be able to eat and to have a car payment and other things. And so it's a very, very expensive place to live. You have gas at north of $6. You have all kinds of, I don't want to say bad and I don't want to sound negative, but those are not positive things to get excited about in terms of the economy as a whole. And so, and I don't expect that rents are going to go down because you have pressure on landlords from utility costs, from insurance costs, from trash and refuse costs. Everything goes up, yet I have rent control from the state, so I can only go a certain amount. And so
what's your incentive to keep that building in Class A space?
Hey, I agree.
Or to take a B building and keep it a B, knowing that it's going to go to a C or D. And guess what? That's tough shit. Excuse me.
Yeah. I don't know if we're allowed. Are we allowed? Paul, are we allowed to swear on the show?
You said no BS.
You're not.
So I was close. Yeah. And I apologize.
We'll clean it up later. It's no big deal.
Yeah. But it's true. It's just, hey, people aren't going to have places to live nice if the landlords don't have an income. And not an income that's crazy when you're making $2,500 on a room. That's high rent for these people, but you can't raise that rent. And a lot of the people that have rent goes back 20 years that they're still protected in their rent control.
In parts of Los Angeles where you have that. But I mean, the fact of the matter
Absolutely.
is, you talk about the landlord, the incentive to fix a place up is really either pride of ownership, or it absolutely has to get done, or the bank or the insurance company required me to do it. But otherwise, to spend money that doesn't have an economic return, you have many people that are just going, I'm just not going to spend it. And so who suffers? The person who lives there at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? I
And
mean,
the prices and everything else. I mean, McDonald's is now paying somebody $20 an hour to cook hamburgers, and it's good for them. But it's hard for me to get people to save people's lives and work for me at $21 or $22 an hour when you can work at McDonald's for $20.
Well, I also go back to
look what it costs for a Big Mac now. They've raised raised the rates. Thank God I quit drinking 22 years ago. I mean, it's $17.50 for a beer at Dodger Stadium. Yeah. These kids are, how do they survive? I don't see how anybody can. I took my son to California Pizza Kitchen. I mean, it was almost $80 for the two of us. We don't drink.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
And the fact of the matter is, you tout it again, you say the optics without getting controversial, but the fact of the matter is, I raised the minimum wage, so everybody's making more, so vote for me because I raised the minimum wage and I did a good thing. But when everything else around you went up by that or more, I got to tell you, the guy at Starbucks or the guy at McDonald's who's getting $20 an hour, when his rent went up, when his gas bill went up, when all of his groceries went up by more than what his pay went up, he actually went backwards at the end of the day. Yeah. He is not further ahead.
No one really figures out that any price increase, these companies aren't going to take a loss. They just pass everything on
100%
to the consumer.
It's funny because
and there's nobody waking up to that thought process.
Right. And if you look, I mean, Starbucks raised, I go to Starbucks, I get a mocha, it was, $4.90. And then the day after the minimum wage went up, it's $5.30. Right. I mean, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but percentage wise, it was a lot, and so everybody else did it, which is why you can't get the $6 burger at Carl's Jr. anymore. It's $16.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I forgot. So don't drink the coffee, just drink water. But then you go, oh my God, if I really figure out the calculation of how much water costs when I buy the specialty water, it's higher than gas.
Yeah,
I mean,
no question.
It's crazy how it works right now.
Well, we could go through this all day, and we could touch on a whole bunch of other issues, and I'm sure we'd get good stuff coming out of it. Paul is waving at me like, hey, we're out of time. I do want to give you an opportunity. So if people want to find out more about SHARE, what's the website where they can go to learn more about it?
It's www.shareselfhelp.org.
So SHARE, selfhelp.org.
Selfhelp.org.
Good.
All one word.
And
push the donation button. We can use you. You can come in and volunteer. If you have lived experience, you can come in and help with the populations. We use the helper theory. When you give to someone else, you're the one that receives more for doing it. So we'd love support. And anytime anybody wants to tour it or come visit, I'm an open book. I'll meet and talk to anybody. Appreciate it.
Good.
And thanks for giving me the time on your show, Barry. And I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts, and certainly keep up the good fight in terms of all the work that you and all the folks within the SHARE organization are doing. It's good work. It's necessary, and I hope that more people get on board with it and that it continues to grow and do the work that it's been doing. So I wish you all the best. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company. We will be back here next week on Let's Talk Real Estate. I want to give special thanks to everybody here at OC Talk Radio for making the show happen. A special thanks to our guest, Brian Ulf, and a special thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you back here next week on Let's Talk Real Estate.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.